Welcome to the Edinburgh Fringe Show. I'm Ewan Spence, and it's time to preview just one very small part of the largest arts festival on the planet. August is coming up. We'll have daily shows, news and interviews for you then. But for now, let's just get a flavour of what's about to land in Scotland's capital city. Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world, whenever you are listening. Welcome to Edinburgh, welcome to the Edinburgh Fringe, and welcome to the Edinburgh Fringe Show. When August comes around, near 3,000 acts descend on the capital city here. The capital city of Scotland remains, but it becomes the capital of the arts world for 3 weeks. Well, it's 4 weeks when you count the press news. It's 5 or 6 weeks when you count all the build-up in the early shows and certainly the first handful of podcasts. It's time for us to do our preview shows just to get everybody into the mood. And very much into the mood in today's episode. I'm going to be speaking to Chris Grace, a comedian who has been at the Fringe many times over the last decade, coming first as a large group doing improv comedy shows, and over the last 2-3 years building up a repertoire as a stand-up solo comedian, performer, and I'm going to use the word storyteller a lot throughout the next couple of weeks because the Fringe is this wonderful place for storytelling, be it through stand-up comedy, ballet, sketch writing, dance, performance, theatre, massive, huge productions, or just small, tiny productions that are taken outdoors around a lamppost. I've no idea if that is an actual show, but if there's Shakespeare around a lamppost, it wouldn't surprise me. It's just so much going on at the Fringe, so much that's special, and I'll never cover everything, but I'll give you a little flavour of it and hope you find something interesting and exciting as well. So our first guest is Chris Grace. His show is called Sardines, a comedy about death. Well, it's his main show. He's doing quite a few others, as you're about to hear. So we're going to talk about that show, the influences, how that show's built up over time and how it relates to the personal tragedies that have happened in Chris's life. But we'll also talk a little bit more about the Fringe. He has been here for over a decade. What is it about the Fringe? What draw does it have to the performers? What potential can it deliver? And what is this romantic power that it has over the arts? All that and more. Chris Grace joins me now. Welcome, Chris.
Hello. Thanks for having me. You know, I had a Fringe podcast at one point and I gave up out of fatigue.
Well, let's see. It's your second show at the Fringe as yourself, but you've been coming here almost as long as I have.
Oh, this is my 11th year in a row.
Right. But half the amount of time that I've been here. But yes.
Yeah.
Why keep coming back?
That's such a good question, Ewan. Do you have an answer for me? No.
My answer is I live here. I don't have to pay for accommodation. So why not? But you can't do that.
I come back because it's truly like the most inspirational month of the year for me as an artist. That's the boring, inspirational answer.
All right, then. In that case, what has it taught you? If you could boil all the Fringe down into sort of what it's done for your life, then what has it done?
Fringe has totally changed my life, actually, because there's a certain kind of theatricality, a certain openness to variety and comedy that is something that you just get immersed in Edinburgh that you don't get that much in the States where I live. So it's had a huge influence on my own work. And I've also just like made so many friends through being there so many years. But I mean, doing the shows at Fringe is like some of the best audiences I've ever done shows for. And I don't know. Like, I really don't know what my career would look like if I hadn't gone to Fringe in 2012, because 2012, 2013, those first 2 or 3 years when I was just going as a performer, where I wasn't like trying to create my own show, I was just doing Baby Wants Candy, which is an improv show I still do. Um, so I would have one show a night, and then I would get to see as much as I wanted. My mind was blown those first couple years, and then I became jaded and cynical like everyone else.
What about that first year or two? Not the show that you were in. What about the other shows you saw? Can you remember any of the ones that just made you think, this is unlike anything else on the planet?
Yeah, I saw Dr. Brown do a clown show, which I had never seen anything like that before. That was mind blowing. I saw uh uh that thing where the person gets in the gorilla suit and just is in the rocking chair for an hour.
Oh, a grown man wears a gorilla suit, sits in a rocking chair, eating a banana and reading a newspaper.
Yep,
I think
I
that
saw
was the title. It
that.
took up like one entire page of the Fringe Guide.
Yes, I saw. I think his name is his name John Robertson, the Dark Room. I just saw so many things like, and I saw also, like, I can't remember what it was that year, but I saw Incredible Circus. It was probably Circa, but the combination of clown, circus, weird comedy shows, just entire genres that are not really accessible in the States. Um, and which are now more like, it's been 15 years, and like it's starting to come over here, but those have influenced me since then.
Did you feel like you belonged at the Fringe?
I don't feel like I belong anywhere. So and that's what next year's Fringe show is about. um
Yeah, what about an artistic
I
level then?
um yes, I mean, I do, it is very nice. I remember walking around Edinburgh, like being there during August. August is a time where most places in the United States you don't want to be because of the weather. I remember walking around Edinburgh and feeling like it was like, oh, this is a bubble. This is like a little fantasy world where we live in a society where every person cares about live performance, and everybody has an opinion on where you should go. Every nook and cranny of every business is a venue. Um, and thinking that it was kind of this like dream like world where like people cared about the arts. um, and I remember going back my second and third and fourth years where I would be back in Edinburgh, and I felt like, oh, I was just here. Like, the 11 months between last year and this year were actually just a really boring dream. And now I'm woken up again back in my actual like artistic home.
So what changed last year? You've done a lot of the improv shows, a lot of collective shows, almost like what we would call gang shows over here. But last year you brought over a solo show. What changed to make you want to do that?
Well, the pragmatic thing that changed was a producer said, hey, I've seen some of your stand-up comedy. I think you should do a solo show. I will fund your show completely myself, and I will have no creative input. I will pay for everything, and you do whatever solo show you want. And of course, I was like, this is great. And then he saw a work in progress video of the show and pulled out completely. And by then, I was booked with Assembly, and then everything was on the hook for me. But it was like the thing that kicked it off. Um, and last year's show was a show I had been thinking about for about 5 years. Same for this year's show. So they are these like sort of narrative, sort of stand-up shows that have been sort of festering in me for years. And it did take someone from the outside being like, you should do one for me to do it. I'd been thinking about doing forever, but there's something about someone else giving you an obligation or deadline, and then conveniently bailing from the responsibility and making me do it all myself.
How did the early shows that you did at the Fringe, you've mentioned Baby Wants Candy there, but you've also been in other improv and shows that are built around like 50 Shades and Thrones and
Yeah.
Hamilton. How have they fed into how you approach the Fringe as a solo?
I think the biggest way they influenced me was the iterative, incremental development process that I took for last year and this year. Thrones the Musical specifically, which I co-wrote, we did about 70 drafts of over 4 years. And we were writing that show while the show was still happening on television. So
This is Game of
we were
Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yes, and we were revising it every year. One year we were doing Thrones the Musical while Game of Thrones was airing um, in August. So we were every Monday we'd have a meeting to update parts of the show. Um, so that was wild. But like I really did learn from that this I've built up this muscle of being able to do a show a lot and letting it grow and being kind of clear-eyed about what's working and what's not working. And so that's really helped me because I start doing the show like in January and get it up on its feet. This is probably like I want to say this is how other people do their Fringe shows, but for me it was a relatively late development in my life of being able to have the stamina and also the sort of emotional resilience to like uh, put up bad shows for like 3 months and sort of not, in other words, stand in front of an audience, do a show that you think is a good idea, and then feel large chunks of the show not work, which is very painful as a performer, but sort of necessary. I think if you insulate yourself by saying like, oh, I'll write it and then I'll workshop it in June and then put it up in August. If you delay that process, if you delay the process of uh, feeling that pain, then it's not going to get the revisions that you need when you bring it to the festival in August.
Festival almost uniquely has 1 hour spots for stand up, but that's generally not what you get on the club scene, even here in the UK, and I suspect it's similar in the US. So, how do you do those first shows? Do you do like an entire hour? Are you breaking it down and just doing the 3 acts individually? When you're going through that iterative process, you aren't working the full hour every time, are you?
It's actually harder to workshop hours of pure stand up in America because now I headline as a stand up comedian. And in America, you might be doing like 5 minute slots, 10 minute slots, even 20. And then at some point, a club wants to book you to do an hour. And in America, it's as a stand up, it's actually quite difficult to be like, okay, I've never done an hour before. How do I practice doing an hour before? And what happens, I think, for most people is they just accept a gig where they are supposed to do an hour and they're like, okay, I'm going to go do it. Um, in on my side, the last two shows have been more a hybrid of stand up and theater. And I think it's not as difficult to book. Um, this is me booking it myself. So it's very hard for me to get paid to do an hour of theater as a workshop. But it's not that hard for me to book like a rehearsal space or to book a one-off night somewhere where and I don't need it to be like sold out full of like 100 people. If I can get 20 people there to workshop the material, that's really all I need. And we also have a Hollywood Fringe Festival, which just finished in June. And so I was able to do the show 5 times there. Relatively low investment of money and resources. And that was great because and that was a small room of like 30 people. And then I can work on the show in that format as well.
So, the show itself, Sardines, that's coming to the Fringe this year, tell us a little bit about it.
This show is basically an exploration of my sister Jessie, my brother Victor, my father Paul, my mother Grace, and my partner James, who from 2012 to 2016 all died. Um, so basically, it was a series of like unexpected deaths in my immediate family, and I thought, let me write a comedy show about it, and that's what it is. It's basically a funny show about death.
How do you go about approaching that then? I mean, where does the creative muse kick in? Presumably, it's a byproduct of grief.
Yes. I mean, I would say especially since my partner James died, we were together for 14 years, and he had a sudden massive heart attack right in front of me and died. I would say a large portion of all of my life activities since then have been some function of grief. Um, this has been a really interesting show to work on because basically I wrote what I think is true and interesting about everything that happened. And I didn't worry as much about where things were going to be funny. And I knew, speaking back to the iterative process that I was talking about, I knew that just by doing the material, it would get funnier over time because I would just, if I do it at a workshop, I might improvise a line here or there. Um, and it has built up over the year where if you saw the show in January, it was not very funny. And a lot of people came to see a show called Sardines, a comedy about death, and mostly just saw a show about death. And then I I've been just basically the same way. I have a very dark sense of humor, which has only grown darker through all of this process. Um, and so by telling the story over and over, it is like one of those anecdotes you have with your pals where you're at the pub and then like the stories get, a little sharper edged with a little more teeth as they grow. And also with a very macabre sense of humor, I feel like the UK is the perfect place to do this show.
I'm curious when you said what you think is true, not what is true.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the show that I thought was true, especially like me recounting things that happened and me finding out later that that is actually not what happened. It's not necessarily like an investigative thing, but I do talk about an idea of sort of holding memories of each other. You and I will have a memory of how this interview went. In this case, we'll have a recording of it, so we can always consult it later. But if we were just chatting on Zoom, and later on I thought you had said a certain thing, um, the fragility of the memory uh, can sort of um, morph over times, and also you and I might hold memories of each other. Um, that we might forget. Like, in other words, I might have thoughts about the way it went, or something you said, or your setup, or, you know, the illustrious palace you live in. Um, and I might remember things that you said and did that you forget 5 years from now. And I might see you at a pub and say, like, oh, remember when we did that interview and you started by saying this or that? And it might refresh this thing in yourself that's like, oh, this is a part of me that I sort of gave to Chris, and Chris carried it for me for a couple years and then gave back to me through the memory. So that is a part of the show in the sense that when you lose somebody, all the things they were carrying for you get lost. Um, and that has been reflected even in the writing of the show, where I spoke a little bit about things that friends did for me after some of these events. And then those friends came to see the show and they were like, oh yeah, you left out this part. And so they like gave back a little piece of the show, which is now in the show.
Does that mean that the show is as fragile as your memories then?
I think it's both fragile and robust at the same time. I think so. I have a very uh I don't know how to describe it. Like I have a very I mean my husband who directed the show would say that I have a very loose attachment to the text. So because he loves to point out, hey, you skipped this paragraph today. Oh, I guess we're moving this page to the front today. I do have a very moment to moment relationship to performing the show. So I wouldn't say it's fragile. I would say it's responsive to, um, it is changeable to the day. It's changeable to things that happen to me, um, leading up to the show. Unfortunately, there are other health issues going on in my life that could affect this show. It might be very different by August. Um, So it's changeable in that way, but I think it's robust in the sense that the bones of the show are always going to be there. And I've done enough performance now that I do feel pretty confident being present there for the audience. I want every live audience that sees me perform to feel like they're getting a show that is special to them that night and that I am right there with them, present and not, as we say in the States, phoning it in.
In all the previews and workshopping you've done since January, then, which has been the most special night of the show so far?
Probably the first one. My friend Ron Barry runs a festival called the Fusebox Festival in Austin, and he gave me this open invitation to workshop the show. It was the first ever like full performance. So in January, February, March, I had done like, hey, I'll invite some friends over and I'll read it to you, or I'll read it to you on Zoom. April was the first time it was sort of open for business for regular people. And so my partner died April 10th, 2014, and the workshop was April 10th, 2024. So it was exactly 10 years from when he had died. Um, and so and I had never really said these words out loud. Um, so it was really special. And I didn't mention that it was like the 10-year anniversary, but like some audiences, some members came up afterwards and like they were like, "Oh, I think some of them actually thought that I like changed the date based on the date of the performance." But they had like noticed, and it was really the sort of muse of theater was in the room that night in terms of the how like sort of alive the moment felt. It was really special. In some ways, my challenge since then has been capturing that the preciousness of that first reading while being a professional that like refines a performance, sort of reliably provides entertainment, and also, my husband will be happy if I remember my lines.
Where can people see the show in Edinburgh?
The show is at the Assembly George Square Studios. It's in studio number 5. It's at 1:40 p.m. every single day, or 13:40, as you like to say. And it starts the 31st of July and runs the entire festival. No days off.
And for those who want to find out more about you online, website, socials, where can we go?
You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Chris Grace Comedy. I have a site, so at chrisgrace.com, and you can also go to patreon.com/Chris Grace Comedy. Especially if you're a creative person, I put up a lot of behind the scenes stuff, a lot of my like work in progress lead ups to this year. And I'm also doing like co-working on projects with people on the Patreon.
And when you're in Edinburgh, are you going to maybe pop back and do one of the old shows? Or are you going to, I'm sure Baby Wants Candy is going to be on somewhere in the Fringe. Are you going to try and get a cameo?
Oh yeah, it's not a cameo. I'm in Baby Wants Candy the whole month. I'm in Baby Wants Candy and Shamilton the whole month as well. And also I'm bringing the Scarlett Johansson show back for 5 nights from the 8th through the 12th. I'm doing a lot of shows.
Presumably you will have links to all of those shows back in your website, but everybody can rest easy. We will have them on our website as well, edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. Links direct into the box office. You can buy your tickets at Edinburgh, and Chris will link back to your website there as well. But for now, a show that is going to continue to build and a career here at Edinburgh. We got you first. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Chris Grace there on talking about his show Sardines, a comedy about death, and his time at the Fringe. The show links themselves, as I said, back at our website, but it's Assembly George Square 5 for Sardines, playing right through to the end of the Fringe at 1:40 p.m. each day. The other show, I'll just flag up Chris Grace's Scarlett Johansson, which is one of the shows that he's bringing back. That plays at Assembly George Square 3, but it's on a very limited run. It's over the second weekend of the Fringe, so from the 8th to the 12th of August at 22:55, 5 to 11 at night. Links to those back at our website, as it will be links back to Chris's Instagram as well, Chris Grace Comedy, if you just want to go and type it in while you're listening. So there we go. That's our first preview. We've got 2 more to come before we switch into our daily shows. And we're going to be looking at the venues of the Fringe, some of the infrastructure that is needed to put on one of these shows, 2 of these shows, many of these shows. That will be coming up next week. We go to daily podcasts Monday through Friday on August the 5th, and our omnibus editions for broadcast on radio, produced in association with Radio 6 International. They're going to start on Saturday the 3rd of August, so check your local listings for details. If you'd like them on your local radio station, then just get in touch with me. You find the contact details back at our website. The Fringe is getting ever closer. The nerves are getting just a little bit higher. So much that I will never be able to bring to you, but I will bring you as much flavour, as much fun, and as much frivolity and seriousness as this festival is rightly known for. I'm Ewan Spence. Ta-ra for now. You've been listening to the Edinburgh Fringe Show, hosted by Ewan Spence, produced by Spence Media and Radio 6 International. Listen to more at edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com.